What happens when someone treated like Hollywood royalty steps onto a late-night stage, expecting admiration, only to be confronted with questions sharp enough to crack their entire image? In a matter of seconds, one single comment would transform a simple interview into a meltdown so intense it felt like the walls themselves were listening. The studio that night glowed under blistering lights, giving the whole set a tense electric atmosphere. Bill Maher sat behind his desk, wearing that signature half-smile, the kind that hinted he already knew something dramatic was about to unfold. Across from him sat Meghan Markle, dressed in an outfit that looked like it belonged in a luxury catalog. Her expression held a certain superiority, as if just showing up was a favor to the entire building. Bill began with a smooth, easy tone. "Thanks for coming on the show tonight. I know you've been selective about where you appear these days." Meghan returned a practiced smile, the kind that stayed far from her eyes. "Well, I only go places where I feel I can have real, meaningful conversations." Bill nodded slowly. "Meaningful. Good. Let's have one then." His voice carried a subtle tension, like a storm warning no one noticed until too late. He didn't waste time. "You've been very vocal about your struggles, with the press, with the royal family, with pretty much anyone who's questioned what you've done. When does personal accountability come into the picture?" The studio fell silent. Even the audience seemed to stop breathing, waiting for Meghan's reaction. Her smile dissolved instantly, replaced by a stare sharp enough to cut glass. "Are you suggesting I'm responsible for the way I've been treated?" Bill remained calm, almost peaceful. "I'm suggesting that maybe not everything is everyone else's fault. You've had issues with your family, your husband's family, the British press, the American press, even your own staff. At a certain point, it's hard not to notice the pattern." Meghan straightened, tension tightening her jaw. "That is incredibly offensive. You don't know what I've been through." "I know what you've shared," Bill replied evenly. "You've talked about it on Oprah, on Netflix, in interviews, in podcasts. Your story has been everywhere." Meghan's voice lifted with anger. "And clearly people like you refuse to believe a woman when she talks about her experiences." Bill raised his hand slightly, not defensive, but steady. "I didn't say I don't believe you. I said the constant victim narrative can feel exhausting." His tone sharpened. "You married a prince. You lived in a palace. Now you live in a massive California mansion. You're worth millions. At what point do you acknowledge that your life isn't the most tragic story ever told?" A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience. Some nodded in agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably. Meghan's face grew redder by the second. "You have no right to minimize my trauma," she snapped. "The racism, the mental health struggles, the lack of support, all of it was real." "I'm not denying that," Bill replied. "But you've had advantages most people dealing with the same issues don't have," he continued, his voice firm but controlled. "You could have walked away quietly, handled everything privately, but instead, you turned your family drama into a multi-million-dollar media brand. And now you're shocked people have questions?" Meghan's reply was immediate and hard. "Those questions come from misogyny and racism." Bill shook his head lightly. "That's the problem. You call everyone who disagrees with you sexist or racist. Some people just think you're wrong. That's allowed. That's part of a free society." Meghan scoffed. "A free society that protects white men like you while tearing down women of color like me." Bill let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Here it comes. Look, I worked for everything I have. I didn't marry into success. I built it. And yes, I've faced criticism too. I just don't make documentaries about how unfair the world is." Suddenly, Meghan pushed her chair back and stood, the sound of scraping metal echoing across the room. "This is exactly what I was talking about. You invited me here for a real conversation, and instead, you attack me with thinly disguised misogyny." Bill's voice remained steady. "Sit down. We're having a conversation. Not every conversation is supposed to be people praising you." "I don't have to stay here and take this," Meghan said, her voice trembling with anger. "You agreed to come," Bill reminded her. "You knew what this show is. I ask tough questions. That's my job. If you wanted someone to shower you with praise, you should have gone on Ellen." Meghan pointed at him sharply, her hand trembling. "How dare you? You think dismissing my concerns makes you clever?" Bill leaned forward on his desk. "What concerns? All I hear is you complaining about your in-laws and how mean the newspapers were. Meanwhile, people out there can't even afford rent, and you're upset about headlines like, 'You made Kate cry.'" The audience gasped loudly. Some people clapped. Meghan's hands shook with fury, her breathing unsteady. The shock rolling through the studio seemed to thicken the air as Meghan glared at Bill with a mix of outrage and disbelief. Her voice trembled as she leaned closer, gripping the edge of his desk as if steadying herself. She fired back with raw anger, saying he was a disgusting human being who sat in a place of privilege while judging others and adding nothing meaningful to society. Her words came out sharp, almost shaking with intensity, and the room felt as if it shrank around them. Bill, unfazed, lifted his brows with calm surprise, almost amused by her outburst. He reminded her that he had spent decades digging into serious subjects like politics, religion, and major social issues. His tone sharpened as he pointed out that her track record consisted mostly of a canceled podcast, a children's book, and curated social media posts that didn't exactly shake the world. His voice wasn't cruel, but it held the edge of someone who'd had enough of carefully tiptoeing around celebrity narratives. Meghan's posture stiffened as she insisted she had used her platform to speak truth to power, saying it with the conviction of someone who truly believed she was on a mission. Bill laughed outright, not mocking but almost incredulous, and told her she wasn't speaking truth to power because she was the power, wealthy, globally known, and connected to every major media outlet. He told her she wasn't some revolutionary. She was someone privileged enough to tell her story anywhere she wanted and profit from it, not a silenced outsider fighting an impossible battle. Meghan's expression turned cold, her voice dropping into something controlled but deeply offended. She said she had come expecting an intelligent discussion and instead found a bully with a microphone trying to tear her down. Bill didn't hesitate. He countered that she acted like someone who wanted royal treatment and sympathy at the same time, and that nobody could play both roles without the whole act slipping apart. Her frustration finally boiled over. She grabbed her purse with sharp, jerking movements, declaring she was done. Bill leaned back with almost casual confidence, telling her of course she was leaving because running away was something she had done before. He reminded her in a steady tone that she had walked away from her own family, from the royal family, and now from a simple conversation because she couldn't handle disagreement. Meghan spun around and delivered a brutal line, accusing him of being desperate for relevance and claiming he peaked decades ago. The audience froze, their silence heavy enough to sink into the walls. Even Bill paused before he recovered, responding calmly that at least he peaked, then asked her what she had accomplished that wasn't tied to her marriage. Meghan's cheeks flushed bright red as she declared she had been a working actress. Bill leaned forward without missing a beat, saying she had been on a cable show most people barely knew existed, which didn't make her special. He said meeting a prince didn't magically crown her as the center of the universe, and that fame built on association wasn't the same as achievement. Meghan raised her chin, insisting she was important because she wanted to make a difference, but Bill asked her exactly what difference she believed she was making. He listed the contradictions she carried, talking about compassion while cutting off her own father, speaking about mental health while supposedly causing emotional distress to others, demanding privacy while revealing intimate details in interviews and documentaries. He said the hypocrisy was impossible to ignore. Meghan pushed back, saying her father sold stories about her to tabloids, but Bill countered swiftly that she had been selling stories about everyone else ever since, the only difference being she made millions doing it. Meghan stepped closer to his desk, her voice rising with emotion as she accused him of lacking empathy, compassion, and basic human decency. Bill responded without raising his voice, saying he had compassion for people who actually struggled, not for wealthy celebrities presenting themselves as fighters of injustice while living in mansions and criticizing anyone who told them no. Meghan's patience broke fully at that moment. She announced loudly that she was leaving and the interview was over, her tone trembling with fury. Bill didn't try to stop her. He simply waved his hand and told her to leave, adding that running away would only prove his point. He said she would likely run straight to her media supporters with another story about being mistreated. The audience sat frozen as Meghan hesitated halfway toward the exit. The tension in the room was thick enough to feel on the skin, like humidity before a storm. Meghan turned one last time, declaring that he would regret everything he'd said and asking if he understood who she was and the influence she had. Bill laughed, a short, stunned, almost delighted laugh, asking if she was threatening him on his own show. He told her she had perfectly illustrated his point. She couldn't handle criticism, so she resorted to intimidation. Meghan tried to clarify that it wasn't a threat, but a fact. Millions of her supporters would hear how she was treated. Bill told her to go ahead and tell them, to post about it, turn it into a podcast episode, or make a social media statement, because the truth was still the truth. He said she walked onto the set expecting to be praised, and the moment real questions appeared, she fell apart. Meghan shouted that he had attacked her non-stop since she sat down, but Bill corrected her, saying he had simply asked her to address her own behavior. If that felt like an attack to her, it revealed more about her than it did about him. She looked toward the audience as if waiting for them to defend her, but most of them sat stiff and uncomfortable, unsure which direction to lean. Meghan said he wasn't worth her time or anyone's time, calling the show garbage and saying the same about the viewers. The audience gasped so loudly the sound bounced off the rafters. The room shook with silent shock as she hurled the insult at the very people seated only feet away from her. Bill blinked, almost surprised at how far she went, and said it was impressive how quickly she resorted to attacking strangers simply because they weren't loudly supporting her. Meghan insisted they were watching a woman being bullied, not a discussion. Bill reminded her that disagreement wasn't bullying, it was conversation. He said her world operated on a simple formula. Anyone who didn't worship her became a villain in her story, and she weaponized labels like racism, sexism, and misogyny to shut down any critique. His voice stayed steady as he said the real world didn't bend to that kind of thinking. Meghan's fists tightened at her sides, and her voice quivered with a mix of fury and hurt as she accused Bill of knowing nothing about the real world. She said he lived in a Hollywood bubble, surrounded by people who told him he was brilliant, while everyday people struggled in ways he couldn't imagine. Bill couldn't stop himself from pointing out the irony, reminding her she lived in Montecito, surrounded by luxury and famous friends, and her closest confidants included billionaires like Oprah. Meghan shot back that Oprah lifted people up instead of tearing them down, but Bill leaned in, saying Oprah made money from people's personal stories, including hers, and that wasn't friendship, it was business. The words hit the air like a spark dropped on dry leaves, and Meghan's entire body stiffened with a frustration that seemed seconds away from erupting. Her face flushed as she warned she needed to leave before saying something she would regret, but Bill answered with a sharp grin and told her it was too late. She already insulted the entire audience, and that moment wasn't going anywhere. Meghan snatched her phone from the chair and marched toward the exit, her heels echoing like hammer strikes on the studio floor. She almost made it beyond the stage when she paused, turned, and hurled more frustration back at him. She said she regretted even coming, that she had hoped he'd evolved into someone capable of a respectful conversation, but instead, he was still the same shock-driven host willing to poke at people for attention. Bill answered immediately, calling her a social climber who craved approval but threw anyone under the bus if it benefited her narrative, her family, her in-laws, her husband's loved ones, even the public. Meghan insisted her narrative was the truth, but Bill fired back that her story changed depending on the moment and barely matched anyone else's version of events. He said the people who knew her often contradicted her, and she instantly labeled every one of them liars. Her response came fast and sharp. Those people are lying. Bill asked if she truly believed the entire world was lying except for her. Her father, her sister, palace staff, the British press, the American press, everyone. He said out loud how unbelievable that sounded, and Meghan accused him of gaslighting her on national television. Bill laughed in disbelief and explained that gaslighting meant making someone question their reality, and he wasn't doing that. He was pointing out inconsistencies because her version didn't match anyone else's. He said calling that gaslighting was simply another shield she used when people asked difficult questions. Meghan turned again toward the exit with a final declaration that she didn't need to stand there and listen to him. Bill called after her, telling her to go if she wanted to, and that doing so would only prove she couldn't handle pushback. Meghan spun with fire in her eyes and said she couldn't handle it because she'd been dealing with attacks for years. Constant criticism, constant pressure, endless harassment. Her words hit the air like heavy weights, her voice cracking as emotion leaked through. Bill softened slightly, just for a moment, and told her that criticism came with being famous. He reminded her that fame wasn't just glamour and photo shoots. It often included tough questions and opinions she didn't like, and she had stepped into that world willingly. Meghan insisted she didn't ask for any of it, but Bill answered with quiet certainty that she absolutely did. He said dating a prince came with public attention, marrying one came with global scrutiny, and joining the most famous family on the planet couldn't possibly come without consequences. He told her she had chosen that life and the visibility that came with it. Meghan wiped at her eyes, trying to hold on to her composure, telling him he had no idea what it felt like, and Bill admitted he didn't know her exact experience. But he said he did know what it felt like to be hated for his opinions, to be criticized constantly, and he handled it by toughening up and not expecting the whole world to agree with him. Meghan snapped back sarcastically, congratulating him on his thick skin, and Bill answered with a simple, "Clearly," as they stared at each other in a silence so heavy it felt like the cameras had stopped rolling. She shook her head slowly, saying she was done for real this time, her voice flat and exhausted. Bill didn't fight her. He simply said, "Okay," letting the word hang in the air like a final curtain drop. Meghan began walking away again, her steps echoing through the studio, the audience so quiet that every footstep sounded like a drum in a cavern. She made it halfway to the exit when Bill called out her name one last time. She stopped, her back still to him, not turning. Bill said that for what it was worth, he genuinely hoped she found whatever she was searching for, but that she wouldn't find it by constantly playing the victim. The words floated across the room like cold air, and Meghan stood still for a long moment. Then, without the slightest glance backward, she disappeared through the exit, swallowed by the shadows backstage. The audience sat frozen in complete disbelief, their silence stretching on, until finally, one person began clapping. The sound was hesitant, cautious, but it grew as another person joined, then another, until half the room applauded while the rest sat stiff with discomfort. Bill looked at the camera with a shrug that carried the weight of a man who'd seen many things but still couldn't quite believe what just happened. He joked lightly about hoping the show wasn't canceled after commercial break, and nervous laughter scattered across the studio as the screen faded out, leaving the room buzzing with a mix of shock and adrenaline. When the cameras cut to commercial, the studio felt like controlled chaos. Bill sat behind his desk staring at the empty chair Meghan had vacated, the seat still slightly angled from how abruptly she pushed it back. A producer rushed onto the stage, his face pale with panic, asking if she had truly left. Bill nodded with certainty, saying she was absolutely gone. The producer anxiously asked if they should chase after her, but Bill shrugged, wondering aloud what they could possibly say. Invite her back so he could ask more questions she clearly didn't want to answer? The producer ran a hand through his hair, visibly stressed about how the fallout would look by the next morning. Bill admitted the story would be everywhere, but at least they got an unforgettable television, even if the producer didn't look remotely relieved. The audience buzzed with whispers and stunned reactions, some leaning toward each other with wide eyes, and others staring blankly ahead as if still processing what they had witnessed. Bill tried to break the tension with a joke, asking if anyone else wanted to come up and storm off his set since they still had airtime to fill. A few people laughed nervously. Most just sat there, stunned into silence, unsure whether they had just witnessed legendary TV or the beginning of a media wildfire. Behind the scenes, crew members were already on their phones, texting friends and family, typing out frantic messages about everything that had unfolded. Security hovered near the exit to ensure Meghan had fully left the building, and the entire studio felt as though it was balancing on the edge of rumor and explosion. When the show returned from commercial, Bill addressed the situation head-on with a tone that blended frustration with clarity. He told the audience that their guest had every right to leave if she wanted to, and he wasn't going to spend the rest of the show tearing her down further. But he did want to highlight something real. He pointed out that too many people only want to face questions they approve of, hear opinions they agree with, and live in bubbles where no one challenges them. He said disagreement wasn't a catastrophe, it wasn't an attack, and it wasn't some world-ending event. The audience responded with stronger applause this time, people nodding as the tension began to ease. He continued, explaining that he didn't hate Meghan Markle and didn't even truly dislike her. He simply believed she was wrong about several things and wasn't handling her situation well. He emphasized that he was allowed to think that, just as she was allowed to think he was a terrible person. The difference, he said, was that he was willing to stay and defend his views, while she chose to walk out instead. The audience clapped again, louder, as if they were starting to find their footing after the emotional whiplash of the interview. Bill transitioned to introducing the next guests, who were visibly more reserved, clearly worried about stepping into the tension left behind. They sat straighter, chose their words carefully, and moved with the politeness of people quietly hoping not to trigger a second explosion. The rest of the show ran smoothly, but the energy in the room never fully returned to normal. A shadow of Meghan's exit lingered in the air, hovering behind each segment, each joke, each applause line. By the time the show ended and the audience filtered out, the Meghan incident had already become the only topic anyone could talk about. People argued amongst themselves in the aisles, some insisting Bill went too far, others saying he had simply asked the questions many people wanted answers to. No matter the opinion, everyone agreed they had witnessed something unforgettable. Bill stayed behind after the cameras cut off, moving through his usual post-show routine with a calm that felt almost too relaxed for what had just happened. When someone asked whether he thought Meghan might sue or make a public statement, Bill answered with a shrug, saying she would do whatever she wanted. He stood by everything he said and wouldn't take any of it back. The interview had been intended as a simple, friendly conversation between a host and a high-profile guest, but instead, it had erupted into one of the most dramatic and chaotic moments in talk show history. All because someone refused to answer questions they didn't like. All because someone expected praise and instead encountered a mirror they didn't want to look into. The empty chair remained on stage for a moment under the bright lights, like a symbol of what happens when inflated entitlement collides with blunt reality. The chair almost seemed to stare back at Bill, reminding him of the exact moment the atmosphere shifted, when tension became conflict and conflict became spectacle. It symbolized how fragile, carefully crafted images could be, how easily they could crack the moment real scrutiny stepped into the room. Bill looked at that chair one last time before heading to his dressing room, knowing the next day would be an avalanche. Headlines, think pieces, online debates, political pundits weighing in, fans battling each other across social media. The internet would burn with opinions, breakdowns, and dramatic edits of the moment Meghan stood up. But in that quiet stretch of time before morning came, it was just an empty chair and a host who didn't back down from asking the questions many others avoided.